from Movie Assault here, and it is time for my What I Watched Last Month video for June 2022. And last month I watched 14 different movies, a lot of them on streaming again, not as many on physical media. I'm going to try to change that in July because I've got obviously plenty to watch, but I don't know. I don't know why I keep watching stuff on streaming. But I'll go through what I watched and just give you kind of a brief summary of my feelings for each one. I won't go into too much detail. I'll let you know if and when there will be a review on movieassault.com. For some of these there already is, and some I've already written and they're scheduled to be published in the future. And I publish a new video every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time on movieassault.com. So anyway, the first one is a documentary. It was actually on HBO called Alabama Snake. And this was about I'm not quite sure which religion, I believe some sort of extreme evangelical preacher or something. They're the people that use the snakes in their religious ceremonies. Anyway, one of the pastors of the church, this church in Alabama, was accused of trying to murder his wife with a snake. So it's kind of an interesting character study of sort of this whole subculture around this type of religion and the crime and whether or not he did it or didn't do it. It's really interesting. Unfortunately, the direction lets it down a little bit. Some of the choices they made, they sort of tried to make it into some kind of pseudo horror movie. There are actual jump scares in some of the dramatic recreations, which kind of let it down and kind of cheapen it a little bit. But if you like true crime stuff, it might be right up your alley. I like the true crime stuff, but this one, you could go either way. So I gave it 2 stars. There is a full review of that one already on movieassault.com. Then I watched Indian Summer. This is a film that I watched with my wife, and I've seen it many times in the past. It's kind of an definitely not an action movie. It's a comedy, drama, little bit of romance in it. And it's kind of a very heavily steeped in nostalgia. It's about these adults who go back to their old summer camp to spend one last time there, and they learn that it's going to close, and each of the characters kind of has their own arc, some of them more successful than others, but Bill Paxton's in it, and Vincent Spano is in it, and I'm gonna regret this, but I can't remember the one actress who's in it that I really like, and whose name is escaping me right now. But I love this movie. It's a schmaltzy movie. Critically, it didn't do that well, but if you like nostalgia, or you like comedies that aren't like slapsticky, just sort of more from the heart, I guess, you might like this movie. But it's called Indian Summer from 1993, and I gave that one 4 stars. Then I watched Val, which is a documentary about Val Kilmer, and it was actually filmed by Val Kilmer. I did not know this, but apparently he, from the beginning of his career, and by beginning of his career, I mean while he was still in not film school, but acting school, he taped everything. He videotaped almost everything, and he compiled this documentary from his own footage, and it includes him working on Real Genius, Top Gun, The Island of Dr. Moreau, just a ton of stuff, and again, it kind of also chronicles his recent battle with throat cancer, and it's kind of touching. It's really good. I gave it 4 stars. It's really worth seeing. You don't have to necessarily be a Val Kilmer fan to appreciate it, because it's kind of got his reflections of life and kind of what he has to deal with, and now that he really, because of the fact that he can't really speak for very long without pain, he has resorted to appearing at conventions and making public appearances and signings and whatnot, and kind of his reflections on what he perceives as living off his past. It's really good, really interesting if you're into kind of behind the scenes of the entertainment industry. It talks about his life and his marriage, failed marriage, and it's just a really kind of an eye-opening movie. I really enjoyed it. I gave that 5 stars as well, or 4 stars, I'm sorry. Then I watched Bloodshot with Vin Diesel. This is a 2020 movie. Came out just as the pandemic was starting, so it kind of failed at the box office because it was impacted by the theater shutting down and whatnot. It's kind of a by-the-numbers superhero movie. It's based on a character named Bloodshot, I believe put out by a comic company called Valiant. I was not familiar with the character or the series of comics at all, but the movie is okay. It's kind of predictable. The beginning is awesome, the way it starts out, and then it kind of falls into some tropes and stuff that you've seen 100 times before in sort of origin films. The superhero that he plays is, he's not really called Bloodshot in the movie. I believe his name is Ray Garrison. He's a soldier, and he's killed, and he's given the ability, he's revived, and given this ability to basically heal using nanotechnology. And as a result, he also has sort of these really, I don't want to say powers, but enhanced strength. So and he also can use the nanotechnology to like connect to the internet and scan for stuff. It's pretty cool. The character, that is. The movie kind of degenerates as it goes on, but it's an interesting concept. They're planning on making a sequel to it, I guess. I'd be interested to see what they do with that now that they don't have to fumble around with the origin story. But Vin Diesel kind of mumbles his way through his lines, but he's really good in the action scenes. So if that's all you care about, definitely check it out. I would hesitantly recommend it. I'd give it a 2.5 stars. Then I watched The Incredible Melting Man. This is from 1977. It was intended to be a parody of the Atomic Age 1950s movies. William Sachs directed it, and I believe he wrote it. But it ended up being kind of tampered with by the producers who wanted to capitalize on the popularity of serious horror films. So they sort of re-edited some stuff and shot some stuff without the director's knowledge, as far as I know, and kind of turned it into sort of this hybrid comedy horror film that the comedy bits don't work very well, and the stuff that's supposed to be serious ends up being the stuff that's funny. Some of the dialogue is just unintentionally hilarious. But it's worth seeing if you're into B-movie stuff. It's got makeup effects by Rick Baker, and that's what really attracted me to it. And those are good, but the movie itself is and I gave it 2 stars. Then I watched possibly the worst movie of the month. Well, I know it's the worst movie of the month, possibly the worst movie I've seen this year. Raiders of the Lost Shark, which is another bad CGI shark movie made in 2015. It's absolutely awful. I don't even want to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but if you do see the cover art, which will be right there, you'll see that whatever is being depicted there, the planes and helicopters and giant shark, none of that stuff happens. This movie is about as boring as you can get. There is a twist at the end where the shark has some sort of power that I won't reveal, not because I care about spoiling the movie because it's garbage, but because it's so ludicrous I don't even want to talk about it. So Raiders of the Lost Shark, I gave a 0.5 star. I gave him credit for at least finishing the film and putting it out. Then I watched Top Gun, like I did last month. Watched it again with my wife. I just picked it up on 4K, which you may have seen if you watched my pickups video for June 2022. My wife wanted to watch it again, so we ended up watching it. Still entertaining, but after a repeat view right after watching it for the first time in a long time, I was able to see kind of why people do pick it apart for being unintentionally hilarious and kind of simplistic. But it's still entertaining. I still enjoy it. I still think Top Gun Maverick is a way better film. And I'm looking forward to watching that again when it comes out on video sometime this year. And I gave that 3.5 stars. Next up, I watched a documentary called Girl 27, and I believe this was made in 2007. And this deals with a case that I had never heard of, and I can't remember the lady's name. But there will be a review of this on movieassault.com coming up in the next week or so. So definitely check that out. It'll have more details and more correct information because I'm doing this all off the top of my head. But there was a woman who was an aspiring dancer in the early 1930s. And she and a couple of hundred other girls were led to believe they were going to be included in a movie shoot. They were actually invited to this party. And then this party was for salesmen, because this was the 1930s, salesmen for MGM. The salesmen were people who tried to sell movies to theaters back then. And to reward them for their good work, because MGM had had a great year, they basically rewarded them with these girls. And according to what is shown in the footage, you can do whatever you want with them. Well, you know, lots of alcohol was served, and a woman ended up getting raped. And rather than being intimidated by the big studio, because back then the studios controlled Hollywood, I mean, anything they said went, and their money was everywhere, she sued and tried to take them to court to get some justice for what happened to her. And this kind of talks about that. It also is a search for the girl to see if she will actually talk in the present day. She ended up passing away before the movie was released, but I'll leave it to you to watch. It's not a well-made movie, but the story is very interesting. It kind of recycles a lot of old footage and kind of focuses too much attention on the filmmaker. His name is David Sten, I believe. But what is there, the core of the film is really interesting. It's on Hulu, so definitely check it out. I gave it 3 stars. It's called Girl 27. Then I watched also on streaming, it was Jerry and Marge Go Large, which was a comedy about a retired man played by Bryan Cranston who figures out a loophole in a lottery game in his state, and based on the amount of money he can bet, he can win. It's like a no-fail scenario. So it's what he ends up doing with this money, with these winnings, and then there's sort of a contrived situation with him and somebody else who figures out the loophole as well. That's the downfall of the movie. But Bryan Cranston is entertaining in it. Annette Bening is in it. But unfortunately, the whole movie comes off as sort of a Hallmark movie for young people. I don't know. It's just kind of not a very good movie. It's funny, but it's a little too schmaltzy. It's based on a true story. I'd rather watch a documentary about the true story than this sort of contrived mess that Jerry and Marge Go Large turns into. I gave it 2 stars. Next up, I watched a film on Netflix called How It Ends, which is a science fiction action movie starring Forrest Whitaker. It's got a really cool premise. There's sort of this event, and the entire country loses power. There's earthquakes. We don't really find out what is happening, but a newly engaged, either newly married or newly engaged man goes to Chicago to meet with his either soon-to-be or new father-in-law and mother-in-law, and he's sort of an ex-military type guy. And they end up he travels from Seattle to Chicago, and they end up having to travel from Chicago to Seattle in a car across, the entire, half the United States, through all the fallout of this event that has happened. For a movie called How It Ends, all I can say is it ends badly. This was not a great movie, but I held on that it would redeem itself in the last reel. And it just ends without resolving anything. And I'm not really spoiling anything. It's just there's no end to this movie. If you want to put yourself through it, definitely watch it. But I gave it 1.5 stars. Next up was Eminence Hill, which is a Western that I watched. It's one of the ones that I picked up at Dollar Tree, one of the past waves. The cover art, as you can see, prominently features Lance Henriksen. He is in the movie for 2 minutes. The actual stars of the movie are the other 2 people who are featured on the cover art. They are in the movie for an appropriate amount of time to be featured in the cover or on the cover. I'll have a full review of this one on movieassault.com coming up in the next couple of weeks. It's obvious this is a low budget film, but it's not bad. I had a good time watching it. I don't really have any major complaints about it. Just that I think the ambition of the filmmaker was kind of outstripped by his budget. But it was entertaining, and I kind of liked it. And for $1 or $1.25 or whatever I ended up paying for it whenever it came out, I really, really enjoyed it. For what it was, I gave it 2.5 stars. Then I went to the theater to see Jurassic World Dominion. This is, of course, the promised finale to the 6 Jurassic Park, Jurassic World films. This I was really disappointed by. I won't get into too much detail because I know it's still in theaters and some of you may not have seen it yet. It was nice to see the original cast from the Jurassic Park movies come back, or the original Jurassic Park, and them coupled with the newer characters from the Jurassic World movies. It was kind of an interesting blend, but all this movie really made me do is remind me of how good the original Jurassic Park was, how jaw-droppingly awesome it was to see those dinosaurs on the screen. Now they're just an excuse for chase sequences and just ridiculous physics and whatever. I mean, I know criticizing a movie for being unrealistic when it's about dinosaurs seems kind of silly, but when there's a movie like Jurassic Park that did it right, and this is a sequel to that, and it's just so wrong, that's where I find the wiggle room to complain. I gave it 2 stars. I'm glad I went, but I don't know. I'll end up putting it in my collection because I'm a completist and I have all the other ones on 4K, so I've already ordered it, but I'll probably only watch it again if I do a complete rewatch of the series. And then to sort of wash that out of my mouth, I watched Jaws with my wife a couple of nights ago. We can watch this movie anytime if we both are kind of like brain dead after a day of work, and we just want to put something on to just watch. Never fails to put Jaws on and everything's okay. I still discover new things about this movie every time I watch it. This last time was no exception. Absolute classic in every sense of the word. If you have not seen Jaws, I don't know what to tell you, but just watch it. Don't even bother with the sequels because all they'll do is spoil your opinion of the original, because none of them stand up to the original at all. But Jaws is just a fantastic movie. 5 stars, undoubtedly. And last but not least, last night, on the last night of June, I watched Endangered on HBO Max. This is a documentary about I believe it's 4 reporters or journalists. One's actually a photographer. 2 are photographers and 2 are reporters. And they are talking about the pressures they feel because of recent restrictions on the freedom of the press. And it's not in some third world country or I'm sorry, developing country. It's in the United States. Brazil is included, and Mexico is included, but 2 of the reporters, one photographer and 1 reporter, are actually working in the United States, and you get to see what they are faced with trying to just cover the news and all of this recent hubbub about fake news and people not doing their research. And if you can watch YouTube, you can do the research that these reporters do. It's just sort of the hostility towards fair and actual thought out journalism and keeping politicians accountable and that kind of stuff. People of a certain political bent will think that this is some left-wing film, but I'm not one of those people. But anyway, if you're interested in watching a documentary about freedom of the press and kind of the declining state of the world in general, definitely check out Endangered. It just came out on June 28th and it is available on HBO Max. So there you go. That's what I watched in the month of June. I appreciate you making it to the end of the video. And as always, feel free to comment below if you've seen any of these movies. What did you watch in June? Let me know. And I'll be interested to hear what you think. So thanks for watching, everybody. Take it easy.